Kaizen changed Toyota. It changed Intel. It changed British cycling from mediocrity to 8 Olympic gold medals. And it can change your home, your routines, and the way you move through your days, starting this week without spending anything. The word means simply change for the better. But what makes Kaizen different from every other self-improvement approach you've tried is this. It doesn't ask for dramatic transformation. It asks for 1%. One small improvement, consistently repeated until it compounds into something unrecognizable from where you started. I know this method from the inside, not from a book. From Anjos Atai Wanate is Ante from childhood. I'm Keiko Nakamura. I'm 72. I grew up in Osaka in a home where Kaizen wasn't a philosophy anyone named. It was simply how my mother and grandmother lived. A small adjustment here, a better arrangement there, a routine refined until it became effortless. Their homes and their lives had an order that seemed easy from the outside, but was built from decades of small, consistent choices. Then I moved overseas. And for 40 years, I stopped making those small choices. I let things accumulate, physically, habitual, mentally. My home became heavy. My routines became chaotic. I managed rather than maintained. When I came back to this method in my early 60s, it wasn't through a productivity course or a corporate seminar. It was through remembering what I grew up watching. And the 7-day framework I'm about to share with you is how I applied Kaizen to my own life, room by room, habit by habit, one small improvement at a time. Day 1, observe before you touch anything. Toyota calls this Genchi Genbutsu. Gokchichu Enjaf Kikjach and Tritsikcho Danchichu Kinch. Go to the actual place and see for yourself. Before they change a single process, Toyota engineers go and stand in the factory and watch. Not assume, not theorize. Watch. Your first day is a watching day. Don't reorganize anything. Don't buy storage boxes. Don't launch a new routine. Today, your only task is to observe your life as it actually is, not as you believe it is, not as you'd like it to be. Follow yourself through a full day with the eyes of a curious stranger. Where does time go without your permission? What do you do on automatic that costs you energy or attention? Where are the moments when you feel friction? The small daily resistances that you've accepted as normal. Write them down, not to judge yourself, but to see clearly. The 20 minutes lost each morning deciding what to wear. The way the kitchen looks every evening after dinner. The drawer you open and close without ever dealing with. The objects you navigate around rather than address. Most of us believe we have a rough sense of where our time and energy go. We almost always underestimate the losses significantly. One of my readers told me after doing this exercise that she thought she spent 10 minutes a day looking for things. She timed herself for a week. It was 43 minutes. You cannot improve what you haven't honestly seen. Today, see it. Day 2. Understand the why behind what you observed. Intel in the 1980s was losing ground to Japanese manufacturers. They could have looked at the results and responded to the surface, cut costs, work faster, change one visible thing. Instead, they mapped their entire business process and discovered the real problem. Their core model was no longer sustainable. One honest analysis led to the decision that saved the company. Ectras Enwaiwaditarti Chang and Atestade Anshiti Chakani exiting memory chips entirely and pivoting to microprocessors. Today you do a version of the same thing. Look at what you observed yesterday and go one level deeper. Not just I waste time in the mornings, but the takbushkrek adaikaki anatichal kadai turdisaikate, but what specifically creates the waste. Not just the kitchen is always messy, But when does the mess begin, and what decisions or non-decisions create it? Map your day visually. Draw the sequence of what actually happens from waking to the evening, including the time each step takes. Then look at the map with the honest question: what is actually necessary here, and what is habit, friction, or accumulated inertia? What you're looking for are what I call decision points, moments in the day where the absence of a prior decision forces a real-time choice that costs you time and mental energy. What to eat for breakfast, what to wear, what to do first when you sit down to work. These improvised decisions accumulate into significant daily loss. When I did this exercise in my 60s, I found that most of my morning difficulty wasn't laziness or poor motivation. It was the complete absence of any preset structure. Every morning, I was rebuilding from scratch something that could have been decided once and maintained automatically. See the map. Understand the structure. Tomorrow, you start adjusting it. Here, I want to tell you about something I wrote. When I was applying KAIZEN to my own life, going through this process seriously, day by day, in my home and in my routines, I kept a journal. Not about productivity, about the experience of changing. What it felt like to observe myself honestly after decades of not doing so. What the small improvements actually produced over weeks and months. What my grandmother's way of living looked like in practice, translated into a modern home. Those notes became a book. I called it 1% Better. Because that's what Kaizen really asks for. Not transformation, not discipline. 1% better every day until the compound effect becomes visible. It's in the pinned comment below this video. Readers write to me about it. Miriam from Portugal said she read it during a period when her life felt completely out of her control, and the framework gave her somewhere to start, not with everything, with one small thing, and that starting with one thing was what she'd always needed permission to do. Charles from South Africa said he'd been trying to reorganize his life for years, and everything he'd tried was too ambitious to sustain, and this was the first approach that was small enough to actually do. Tomoko from Japan, she grew up in Kyoto and moved overseas like me, said reading it felt like being given back a way of thinking she'd grown up with and lost, and she cried at the end of the first chapter. It's in the pinned comment. Now, back to the week. Day 3, find the small adjustments with large compound effects. Unilever, in one of its Indian manufacturing plants, adjusted the speed of industrial fans during the soap drying process. A tiny change, invisible in its smallness. The result was 4% less energy consumption annually, saving hundreds of thousands of euros and reducing emissions significantly. The lesson: you don't need to redesign the whole system. You need to find the points where a small adjustment produces outsized return. Look at your day map from yesterday and identify 3 to 5 micro adjustments. Changes so small, they require almost no effort or resources, but that remove friction from daily life. Setting out tomorrow's clothes tonight. Keeping a glass of water on the bedside table. Placing everything needed for morning in one spot before sleep. Moving the most used kitchen items to the most accessible shelf. Designating one surface in the house for incoming items that need to be dealt with. And instead of letting them distribute across every horizontal surface in the home. These sound trivial. They're not. Repeated daily, they eliminate dozens of small decisions, frictions, and frustrations that currently cost you cumulative time and energy you've stopped noticing because you've accepted them as normal. They are not normal. They are solvable. Today, identify yours. As day 4, act without waiting for perfect. The paralysis of perfectionism has cost more hours of human life than almost any other psychological pattern. We wait until the plan is complete, the conditions are right, the moment is perfect, and then no adin ansekai in shakarge kau anchage turte. And those conditions never arrive, so nothing begins. Today's principle, imperfect action beats perfect inaction every time. Choose one thing from your list of micro adjustments and implement it today, not this weekend. Not when you've thought it through more carefully. Today. It doesn't need to be permanent. It doesn't need to be optimal. It needs to exist. Because existence is what you can learn from, and learning from something imperfect is infinitely more productive than continuing to plan something perfect. I'll tell you something honest. When I began reorganizing my home in my 60s, my first attempts were not elegant. I rearranged things and then rearranged them again. I created systems that didn't work and adjusted them. I started before I was ready, repeatedly, because starting imperfectly was the only path to eventually starting well. The bicycle only balances when you're pedaling. Act. Adjust as you move. Day 5. Measure what actually changed. Dave Brailsford's British cycling team pursued what they called aggregation of marginal gains. A 1% improvement in everything. But the practice was only powerful because every change was measured. They didn't assume the new saddle position was better. They timed it. They measured recovery. They recorded sleep quality under different conditions. You cannot know whether your changes are working without measuring them. Today, create a simple tracking system. Not elaborate. A notebook or a notes app on your phone is enough. For 1 week, record daily your energy level at midday, your sense of control over your time, the state of the main living space when the day ends. After 1 week, look at the data. On the days you applied your micro adjustments, did those numbers change? If yes, you have evidence. If not, you have information that directs you toward a better adjustment. Most of us operate on feelings and assumptions. We think a change helped because it felt different in the first 3 days. Measurement tells you whether the feeling held. Champions don't guess, they check. Day 6. Standardize what works. McDonald's serves consistent food across 50,000 locations because nothing that works is left to improvisation. Each process that produces a good result is documented, standardized, and repeated exactly, removing the need for real-time decision-making from every transaction. You are not McDonald's, but the principle applies. When you find a routine or arrangement that genuinely works, that reduces friction, produces calm, saves time, improves your morning or your evening, don't leave it to chance. Write it down. Make it the default. Remove the need to redecide it every day. What goes on the bedside table? The order of your morning sequence, where specific categories of objects live. The sequence of your kitchen reset before bed. These are decisions that can be made once and maintained automatically, freeing your cognitive bandwidth for things that actually require fresh thinking. After my return from Japan, I spent several months experimenting. Then I began documenting what worked. The arrangement of my kitchen that made cooking genuinely efficient. The evening sequence that reliably produced a calm morning. The placement of objects that meant I never searched for anything. These are now standards. I don't think about them, they simply run. And that automaticity is exactly what you're building toward. Day 7. Review, refine, begin again. Pixar doesn't declare a film finished when it works. They have a process called the Brain Trust, a group of senior creatives who review even late-stage work, looking for what can still be improved, what isn't quite right, what the audience will notice even if the team has stopped seeing it. Today is your Brain Trust Day. Look at this week with fresh eyes. What micro-adjustment created the most noticeable positive change? What felt better on paper than in practice? What's your next small thing? The one that, now that last week's adjustments are in place, becomes visible as the next point to improve. The Kaizen cycle never ends. It doesn't end because it's not designed to reach a final state. It's designed to maintain direction. Observe, analyze, adjust, act, measure, standardize, review, and then observe again with more information than you had at the beginning of the previous cycle. My grandmother's home was maintained this way for 60 years. Not with drama, not with major overhauls, not with anything that could be called an intervention. With constant small attention that accumulated into a home that worked, that breathed, that held the people inside it without demanding too much in return. I want to be direct about something before I close. The productivity industry has made billions convincing people that transformation requires large systems, complex tools, and significant investment. Apps, planners, courses, subscriptions. The more complicated the solution appears, the more justified the price. Kaizen is the opposite of this. It requires almost nothing and produces results that compound beyond what any single dramatic intervention could achieve. It cannot be packaged attractively because its power is in repetition and honesty, not in novelty. My grandmother didn't have a productivity system. She had Kaizen, lived as naturally as breathing, built into every small daily choice. Her home and her life reflected decades of 1% improvements, accumulated silently into something that looked effortless from the outside. It was not effortless. It was consistent. The distinction matters. 7 days gives you the beginning of the cycle. The results come from repeating it next week and the week after and the month after that, always with slightly more information than you had the last time around. You already have everything you need to start. A notebook. Honest observation. The willingness to begin imperfectly. 1% better, the full account of how I applied Kaizen to my home and life after 60 is in the pinned comment below. Begin today. The cycle starts with observation, and you can observe right now.